War is not always a sign of strength. Sometimes the most powerful move a nation can make is to step back, because real power isn't proven by how quickly you strike. It's proven by how much you're willing to risk losing if you do. History has shown us something uncomfortable. The nations with the most weapons, the biggest armies, the loudest threats, are often the same ones that hesitate at the edge of war. Not because they're weak, but because they understand the cost better than anyone else. They've done the math. They've seen what happens after the headlines fade. They know that once the first missile is launched, control becomes an illusion. And here's the truth most people never talk about. War is easy to start, but almost impossible to contain. So, when a powerful nation pauses, when it chooses silence over retaliation, when it steps back instead of forward, it's not fear, it's calculation, it's strategy, it's survival. Because sometimes the greatest victory is the war you never fight. Power is often misunderstood as aggression, especially in the way men are conditioned to see the world. From a young age, men are taught that dominance, control, and the willingness to fight define strength, while hesitation is mistaken for weakness. But true power reveals itself in restraint, the ability to hold back when every instinct pushes you forward. It's the discipline to pause, to assess, and to understand that reacting impulsively can cost far more than it gains. Women, on the other hand, often perceive strength through emotional intelligence and long-term stability. They see restraint not as weakness, but as maturity, the capacity to protect what truly matters instead of risking it for pride. This contrast creates a deeper truth. When men learn to balance their instinct to act with the wisdom to wait, they step into a higher form of leadership. Nations mirror this same psychology, where stepping back from war is not surrender, but a conscious decision to preserve influence, stability, and future control. Real strength emerges when the need to prove power is replaced by the confidence of already having it. When silence becomes louder than threats, and when restraint becomes the ultimate display of control. The strongest nations don't react to the moment. They design for the future. While others chase quick victories and immediate validation, true power is built on patience, on decisions that may not pay off today, but shape dominance years from now. This mirrors a deeper pattern in men's psychology, where the urge to act fast, to win now, often overrides the discipline required to build something lasting. The impulse is to prove strength instantly, but real strength is measured by what still stands decades later. Women often see this differently, valuing consistency, security, and long-term stability over short bursts of dominance. They recognize that what feels powerful in the moment can be destructive over time, and that true leadership protects the future, not just the present. When men begin to adopt this perspective, they shift from reaction to strategy, from ego-driven decisions to purpose-driven ones. Nations that step back from war are not avoiding conflict. They are choosing a timeline where they remain powerful long after others have burned out. Enduring influence comes from those who understand that time is the ultimate battlefield, where patience outlasts aggression and foresight quietly defeats impulse. Winning a war can feel like the ultimate proof of strength, especially through the lens of how men are often wired to think. Victory satisfies the need to dominate, to overcome, to prove superiority in a clear and visible way. But that same instinct can blind judgment because it focuses on the outcome of the fight, not the cost of it. What looks like a win on the surface can quietly dismantle stability, drain resources, and create consequences that outlast the celebration. Women often look beyond the moment of victory and ask a different question. What remains after everything is over? They tend to evaluate strength not just by what is gained, but by what is preserved: relationships, security, and the ability to sustain peace. This contrast exposes a deeper reality. When men begin to think beyond the immediate win and consider the long-term impact, their decisions shift from proving power to protecting it. Nations that step back understand this clearly, knowing that destruction, even when justified, can weaken them in ways no enemy ever could. True awareness begins when the definition of winning expands beyond defeating an opponent to understanding the irreversible losses that come with it. Control feels strongest right before the first move is made. In the psychology of many men, there's a belief that initiating action, especially in conflict, means taking charge, asserting dominance, and shaping the outcome. But the moment conflict begins, that sense of control starts to slip. Variables multiply, emotions escalate, and what once seemed predictable becomes chaotic. The need to act can override the need to think, and suddenly the situation is no longer being directed. It's unfolding on its own terms. Women often recognize this shift earlier, understanding that control is not about initiating force, but about managing consequences. They see how quickly situations spiral once emotion replaces clarity, and how the illusion of control can trap people into decisions they can't reverse. This perspective reveals a deeper truth. When men learn to pause and resist the urge to engage immediately, they preserve the very control they believe they're asserting. Nations opera. On this same principle, where stepping back is not hesitation, but a calculated effort to avoid entering a chain of events that no one can fully control. Real authority is not defined by the ability to start conflict, but by the awareness of what cannot be controlled once it begins. The cost of war is never what it looks like at the beginning. In the mindset many men are conditioned to adopt, challenges are approached like battles to be won, risks are calculated quickly, and the focus stays on the visible outcome: victory, dominance, control. But what gets overlooked is everything that cannot be measured up front. The emotional toll, the long-term instability, the ripple effects that continue long after the initial objective is achieved. The desire to act, to respond, to prove strength often underestimates how deep the consequences can go. Women tend to evaluate cost differently, looking beyond the immediate exchange and into the lasting impact it creates. They see how disruption affects not just the present but the future, families, systems, and the sense of security that takes years to rebuild. This perspective highlights something critical. When men begin to integrate this broader awareness, their definition of strength evolves from taking action to understanding responsibility. Nations that step back from war are not misjudging the threat. They are recognizing that the aftermath carries a weight no strategy can fully contain. True calculation begins when the visible price is no longer the only factor. When leaders account for the unseen damage, the prolonged recovery, and the reality that some losses cannot be reversed once they are set in motion. Real dominance is not about overpowering an opponent. It's about mastering the instinct to engage in the first place. Many men are raised to associate strength with action, with stepping forward when challenged, with proving their worth through confrontation. The idea of walking away feels unnatural, almost like surrender. But that instinct, while powerful, can also be limiting because it ties strength to reaction instead of control. The man who feels he must always respond is not in control of the situation. He is controlled by it. Women often interpret dominance through a different lens, one that values emotional stability and the ability to de-escalate rather than intensify. They recognize that constant confrontation is not a sign of strength, but a sign of unresolved tension, where the need to prove becomes louder than the ability to protect. This perspective introduces a shift. When men begin to understand that not every challenge deserves a response, they move from reacting to choosing. And in that choice, a different kind of power emerges, one that is not easily shaken or manipulated. Nations operate under the same psychological patterns, where the pressure to respond can come from pride, perception, or fear of appearing weak. But the strongest nations understand that every conflict entered is a loss of control, a drain on resources, and a risk to long-term stability. They don't avoid war because they lack power. They avoid it because they understand it deeply. Knowing when not to fight is not passive. It's a deliberate, strategic decision rooted in clarity, patience, and the confidence that true dominance doesn't need to announce itself.